This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Hi friends, today we're going to talk about exactly what the heck a Primaris is. And that's a simple answer. The Primaris Psykers are simply the most powerful and elite of the Imperial Guard sanctioned Psyker ranks. Oh, we talked about Guard last week and now we have to do Marines. Okay then. And also, I'm gonna primarily focus on the lore of the Primaris, as the controversy behind them has been covered pretty well and is kinda old news at this point. So let's get ready to plagiarize, throw your stupid old toys away, and talk about the super ultra even cooler Marines that you need to buy now! Primaris Space Marines are the newest versions of Space Marines created by Archmagos Belisarius Cull. These guys are than Firstborn Marines and were 10,000 years in the making. Sometime after the Horus Heresy had concluded, Rabute Gilliman gave Cull some of his and his brother's very special seed, along with some other cool toys to make a new breed of Space Marines to better defend the Imperium. And speaking of defending, wouldn't it be nice to have something defending your personal information online? Yes, I think it would. And that's why today's video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Along with all the awesome online security stuff, my favorite Surfshark feature is how it lets me change my virtual location. With Surfshark, I'm able to move my virtual self to one of Surfshark's over 3,200 servers in 100 countries. This is cool since it allows me to watch shows and movies blocked in my country. All you have to do is connect to a server in a country where the thing you want to watch is available, and zip zop zoovie, you're watching a movie. Arguably more important than watching region-locked movies, though, is that Surfshark encrypts your online data to secure your information when you're on public networks. In addition, it masks your IP address to keep your identity safe. It also doesn't keep logs, so that your location and download history isn't connected to your identity, which is very nice. Surfshark is super fast, secure, blocks ads, and lets you change your location on the fly. Plus, they have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So, if that sounds cool to you, be sure to check out my link in the description, surfshark.com/crackduck, and use my code CRACKDUCK for an extra 4 months free on your subscription. Huge thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Anyways though, the most important of these cool toys was a little doodad called the Sancte Primus Portum. This was an artifact that contained the genetic material of all the Primarchs, including the Lost and the Heretical. This allowed Cull to study the various Primarchs' gene flaws and potentially fix them. And the other artifacts given to Cull helped him develop the new Marines. But I reckon they could have helped a little bit more, considering it took Cull 10,000 years to finish his little project. Or you could choose to believe my personal, extremely moronic but funny headcanon that Cull is just a chronic procrastinator, much like myself, and his boss going into a mega coma probably didn't help this either. So he could have finished the Primaris project in like a work week, but he slacked off for 10,000 years until the fall of Cadia and resurrection of Gilliman presented a sufficient oh shit moment for him to finish and submit the Primaris at 11:59 p.m. But back to actual canon. Cull mostly finished his project a little after Abaddon split the galaxy in two at the fall of Cadia. When Gilliman returned and took command of the Imperium, he ordered Cull to unveil his Primaris Space Marines in order to help the Imperium regain stability after the birth of the Great Rift. These first Primaris were known as the Awoken, since they were mostly recruited in the times of the Heresy and were actively worked on by Cull since then. The initial wave was mobilized for Gilliman's Indominus Crusade and proved a powerful and useful force in fortifying Imperium Sanctus and reclaiming Imperial worlds lost in Imperium Nihilus. Half of the original batch of the Awoken Primaris were used to make new chapters in the Ultima Founding, and the other half formed the Grey Shields. The Grey Shields were meant to reinforce existing chapters, but fought as one unit until they were able to reunite with their true chapter. Also, was this supposed to be a little joke reference to Unpainted Marines? Like, you technically do have an actual lore justification for fielding Grey Primaris as soon as possible along with your old Painted Marines. I don't know, I just thought that was funny. But regardless, once they reinforced their chapter, they would ditch their gray armor and adopt a proper chapter heraldry. The only mark they retain is a gray chevron over their chapter symbol. The reception to these new Marines varied from chapter to chapter. Many welcomed them as much needed reinforcements, while others felt skeptical, didn't trust the Mechanicus, or outright didn't accept Primaris as true brothers since they lacked culture and were weirdos. But lucky for the Primaris, and unlucky for anyone who didn't like the Primaris, the Custodes usually escorted the new recruits and encouraged them to accept their new brothers. But despite what they felt about Primaris, there is no doubt that they proved helpful in these trying times. These new Marines are bigger, stronger, and more resilient. In addition, they had fancy new gear whose machine spirits especially liked them since these Marines were made on Mars. However, these original Marines did have some weaknesses other than being social outcasts. First, they were made to only specialize in their unit type in order to give them a comparable expertise in these fields to firstborn veterans. This made the new Marines especially inflexible and less versatile than their famously jack-of-all-trades firstborn counterparts. For example, a Hellblaster would only know how to blast hell, while an aggressor only knows how to blast fist guns and look cool. They also lacked true experience. They had all the theoretical knowledge needed and sometimes even exceeded their firstborn counterparts in this field, but they had absolutely no practical experience. So, compared to the potential veterans of centuries and even newly recruited firstborn who likely face a ton of challenges just from their aspirant trials alone, the Primaris lacked valuable experience. In Pokemon terms, they had perfect IVs but no EVs. But despite any hiccups, the Primaris were a success and they proved valuable. They were a symbol of hope in one of the Imperium's darkest hours. But even so, these reinforcements, no matter how powerful, were not enough to vanquish the enemies of the Imperium and reverse the incredible decline of society. Thus, more Primaris would need to be made to continue humanity's fight for survival. Of the new Primaris, there would be two kinds, the Indoctrinated and the Ascended. The Indoctrinated were simply Primaris Marines made from aspirants just like Marine chapters usually do. Call taught the chapters how to create new Primaris and, well, they did that. Some chapters made all of their new aspirants Primaris, while others more skeptical chapters only made a fraction of the new aspirants Primaris. And the Indoctrinator was generally better than the Awoken since they had the best of both worlds, getting Primaris enhancements along with the valuable experience and training of traditional Firstborn. The final type of Primaris were known as the Ascended. These were Firstborn Marines who underwent the Rubicon Primaris to get Primaris enhancements. For a full-fledged Astartes to cross the Rubicon was a dangerous endeavor, and Call even warned against it as the operation was not yet fully perfected. It was said that there was only about a 40% survival rate initially. Unless, of course, you were a named character. If so, the survival rate skyrocketed to an astonishing 110%. Whoopee! Which also, honestly, is okay. I'm in the camp that thinks plot armor used well is a good thing. I don't think anyone really wants their favorite character to die to medical malpractice. Anyways, despite the risk, many Marines sought more power to better fight for the Imperium and underwent the risky operation. And it was a grueling process. In order to cross the Rubicon, a Marine is cut open literally from head to toe, opening them up for the procedure. Then, their ribs are cracked open to give surgeons access to all their organ systems, and then, their healing factor is suppressed literally to the point of death so that the extra Primaris organs can be implanted. The Magnificat is implanted in the brain, the Belisarian Furnace is added, which stimulates rapid growth, which is incredibly painful to normal Marines since it causes their bones and muscles to rapidly break apart and reform themselves, and finally, the sinew coils are added by encasing their sinews in Durasteel, which is also incredibly painful. And after all these are implanted and the Marine is closed up, the surgeons resuscitate the Marine. Then, those strong enough are able to come back to life by activating their Belisarian Furnace to reinvigorate themselves, and they are reborn Primaris. Those not strong enough have their organs harvested in order to be used for other aspirants. And since the Marine essentially needs to be killed and reborn, the Rubicon Primaris has become somewhat of a last resort operation to save gravely injured Marines, as was the case with guys like Titus and Ragnar. Also, after the Rubicon, many Marines' personalities changed. Since the Primaris Marines were built to be more cold and efficient warriors, those who underwent the Primaris operation ended up more cold, detached, and callous, among other things. For example, this can partially explain why Titus felt a bit different than he was in Space Marine 1, along with the centuries of torture, of course. And another example is that Primaris are generally less caring towards the normal humans of the Imperium. Yet another reason to dislike them. But anyways, after a while, the operation became sophisticated enough that it was rare for Marines to die to the Rubicon, and almost every Marine undergoes the operation now. Which, looping back, I suppose I should go over exactly what the Primaris augments are. Firstly, there's a Magnificat. This organ stimulates growth and amplifies all the other Space Marine organs, especially the Osmodula and Biscopia. These are responsible for Marines' enhanced bones and muscles respectively. So, essentially, the organ increases a Marine's enhancements, especially their durability and strength. Then, the sinew coils also enhance strength and durability as they enhance and reinforce all the Marine's tendons and ligaments with Durasteel coils. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, is the Belisarian furnace. This organ triggers in high stress scenarios and pumps out hormones that act as combat stimulants and enhances the Marine's healing factor to an insane degree. It basically gives the Marines a revive on death buff. In addition to these organs, Primaris Marines are genetically more stable, meaning the notoriously unstable gene seeds like Raven Guard and Space Wolves are able to be reliably used. It is also theorized that this would eliminate gene flaws like the Red Thirst, which would be super hella lame, but luckily that wasn't true and Primaris Marines are allowed to be at least a little bit interesting. Anyways, next up, let's talk about their new equipment. I'll likely go more in depth in a future video, but the basics are they got the Mark 10 Tacticus armor and a whole host of improved weapons. The Mark 10 armor combines aspects of various past armor marks and is designed to be a modular system allowing for configurations befitting a number of roles. This allows the same armor to be used by tanky fellas like aggressors or faster and lighter squads like reavers, simply by changing some plates around and adding equipment to the armor. These configurations are most commonly broken down into Gravis, Phobos, and the standard variants. As for Primaris weapons, they're basically just better versions of the old weapons. They also look a whole lot worse in my opinion, so that's something. The Heavy Bolter especially looks boring as hell compared to the Firstborn equivalents, but we won't get into that now. Almost all the Primaris weapons also have this little tactical fidget spinner doodad, which we can only logically infer is the sole mechanism to make the Primaris weapons stronger and better. But finally, let's close this off with my personal thoughts on Primaris. I didn't want to go fully in depth on the Primaris drama as others have covered a ton already, but I might as well share a few thoughts. And, I personally don't like the Primaris, as to me they symbolize a shift in direction for 40k both lore-wise and aesthetically. Lore-wise, they kind of spit in the face of a core theme of the setting, that being stagnation and decline, which I've talked about before, but essentially I don't like things like constant Primarchs returning and literally objectively better Space Marines being made because it betrays a fundamental aspect of the setting to sell new things. It also makes 40k end times kind of an inevitability in my eyes, which is super lame. The TLDR of my thoughts is that I kind of prefer 40k as a setting to tell your own stories through games and homebrews or whatnot, with lore events to create atmosphere and help people play thematic games and imagine cool stories, rather than a grand narrative focused on a few key characters like Gilliman, Call, Abaddon, and a few other Primarchs. Basically, I don't want 40k to become Horus Heresy Part 2. I don't think I fully articulate how I feel in this blurb, so I'll make a comment with further context so this video isn't like an hour long. But perhaps an even bigger complaint I have with the Primaris is that I fucking hate their aesthetics. Ew, look at these. The Primaris are a hard line where you can see GW shifting their model design philosophy away from the more grungy and pseudo-gothic future look to a more sleek and tactical generic sci-fi look. And the worst thing is that this permeated to almost all factions. Don't get me wrong, they still make cool models from time to time. I think the new Space Wolves are pretty peak, but in general, having all the Marines with the same exact armor, replacing iconic features of Firstborn, and making the armor modular makes the Marines feel like personality-less stormtroopers or something. Like, just look at this picture. It's subtle, but each and every Marine has little differences that really sell the fact that they're veterans of an endless war with armor made over millennia from remnants of a bygone era. Granted, the first Primaris are newbies and wouldn't have such variation, but they're so damn samey. Even the Tactical Squad model kit has cool, subtle variation between Marines with the exact same armor mark, and I feel that goes a long way. Luckily, it seems GW is backtracking a little bit. Again, the Space Wolves and Black Templar look really cool and unique, but I just don't think we'll ever fully go back to the old aesthetic and feel. Which, if you like the new aesthetic, that's great. I'm not saying you're a fake fan because you like a certain look that I don't, but for me, I do think it kind of betrays a core aspect of what 40k used to be known for. And also, it's just like an objectively shitty move to introduce a new line that is canonically better in every single possible way just to sell new models. Like, let's not lie to ourselves, even if you love Primaris, this was the intention from the start. Like, Space Marine models should be taller than a damn guardsman, but they didn't have to write in lore that these models are new Space Marines who are better in literally every single way possible, and that even your stupid old Marines want to become the new Primaris Space Marines. But yeah, if you want more of my thoughts, I might also make a comment for this, or you can watch this old video where I kind of get the gist of what I feel out, but I don't think I really articulated it as effectively as I hoped since I was still pretty new to video making at the time. But anyways, that's the lore of the Primaris Marines. I'm personally not the biggest fan, but I can see why people like them. But anyways, don't forget to check out Surfshark in the link below and use my code CRACKDUCK for an extra 4 months free on your subscription. As always, thank you for watching, and big thanks to the patrons who help me make these cool videos. I genuinely appreciate it. And as always, please like, comment, subscribe, and consider sharing to all your objectively better at everything ever buddies. Thanks. Also, how the hell are they going to replace one of the most iconic helmets in fictions with this shit? I still can't get over that. I know it's a Mark IV and that's cool, blah blah blah, but oh my gosh, these look cool like here and there, but the Mark VII is just so damn iconic.